From around the Beltway to around the world, this is the Daily Drum on 96.3 WHUR. Plus, now every Wednesday on WHUT TV, bringing you the information you need that matters most. Better together. Here's Harold Fisher.
Good evening. This is the Daily Drum for Wednesday, January 3rd. I'm Bramante Bryant, in for Harold Fisher. Well, the man charged with shooting and killing a woman inside a D.C. hotel room at a New Year's Eve party pled guilty today in D.C. court, or not guilty, rather. According to court documents, police say 18-year-old Jelani Cousin fired 2 shots through a closed-door hotel room at the Embassy Suites in Friendship Heights. This after being asked to leave a party there following an argument. Both shots fired by Cousin struck 18-year-old Ashley Hines of Clinton. Hines, a student at LSU and home for the holidays, was reportedly preparing to leave the party when struck. Staying in the district, D.C. is putting money behind his push to reduce youth crime in the city. District Attorney General Brian Schwab announcing today that his office is making available $250,000 in grants to organizations to help cut youth crime in the nation's capital.
We're at an unacceptable state in our city in terms of addressing public safety, and it's incumbent upon all of us, government and community, to do everything we can.
The deadline for applying for the Leaders of Tomorrow's program is February 2nd. Where nearly half of black D.C. residents live in medically underserved areas. This is according to analysis done by the Washington Post. The report is based on federal data, which shows the rates of heart disease, hypertension, and other chronic conditions are more prevalent in neighborhoods with a shortage of primary care services, with many of those communities in D.C. located east of the Anacostia. And the Speaker of the House, along with 50 other plus congressional Republicans, were at the U.S. southern border today protesting President Biden's policy regarding illegal immigration there. The trip comes as House Republicans have stepped up plans to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas over his handling of the border crisis. Internationally, 2 bombs exploded today in Iran, killing at least 103 people at a commemoration for a top Iranian general killed in 2020 in a U.S. drone attack. No one has claimed responsibility for what is thought to be the deadliest attack to target Iran since the country's 1979 Islamic Revolution. Iran's leaders vowed to punish those responsible for the blast, which wounded over 200 people. In sports, Sam is the man again. Commanders coach Ron Rivera announcing today that Sam Howell will start the season finale Sunday against the Cowboys in what has been a rough season for the quarterback and the team. In college hoops, Howard's men's basketball team fell to Yale today 55-44 in an afternoon contest at Burr Gymnasium. Here's a look at our weather. A nice day to be out with sunny skies and temps reaching 45 degrees tonight. Clear with a low of 37 degrees. Tomorrow, partly cloudy with temperatures in the mid-40s. Well, coming up, we take a look at some of the top stories of the week at the Reporters Roundtable. The phone lines are open, 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Insight is next on WHUR and WHUT TV.
On the go and on
Going beyond the
demand,
headlines of the
WHUR
deep
and WHUT are with you. Download the WHUR app today to get full access to shows, playlists, and our latest contest. To access WHUT on demand, download the PBS app and make Howard University Television your station. Catch up on our WHUT original productions anytime, anyplace on YouTube at WHUT TV. WHUR and WHUT, better together.
D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, you might have noticed something a little different on Monday nights at 8 p.m. I'm Angie Ange, our Director of Content here at WHUT. And Monday nights at 8 p.m., we like to call it Must See DMV. All your favorite shows from all your favorite creators focus solely on what makes D.C., Maryland, and Virginia so special. So set your clock, and we'll catch you at 8 p.m. right here on WHUT, Howard University Television, telling your stories on your station.
Going beyond the headlines to the deeper issues. 96.3 WHUR and HUR Voices, Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Inside segment, where your questions and comments matter. At 202-319-7810. Join the conversation.
Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR, Sirius XM Channel 141, 96.3 HD2 and 98.3 FM. and WHUT TV. This is the Insight segment. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. We are at the Reporters Roundtable talking about some of the top stories of the week. Food assistance funding in the district with lawsuits threatened. A first ever president of Harvard is out. A new year, the same issues of violence in the DMV. Just some of the stories we'll discuss tonight on the Reporters Roundtable. Joining us is Sonya Ross, founder and editor-in-chief of Black Women Unmuted, and Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent with American Urban Radio. Lady, thank you so much for being with us. Again, phone lines are open, 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. As usual, we'd like you to be part of the conversation. It's a reporter's roundtable, but you are welcome to the conversation and the roundtable. Sonya Ross, I'm going to start with you. We're going to start local right here in D.C. This SNAP program, right, and food assistance, $39 million has been allocated, right, for the city to use to help those low-income residents who need the help. The mayor has said, I don't know if we want to use that $39 million for that. Maybe we could use it somewhere else. There's a law in the district that says she has to use that money for that. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a multi-pronged question, but I'm going to just start with one. The optics, I would think, they don't look good if the mayor is holding up money, allegedly, that would go to low-income residents who need it for food assistance. How do you see this story playing out in terms, again, let's just look at the optics of it.
Well, first, let me say this is a classic and typical bottleneck of federal resources for states. So the district is not that different from a whole lot of other states. And really, it's sort of a flaw in the way the Biden administration has been disseminating this kind of assistance. They just fling it at the states and let them decide what they want to do with it. So in that regard, this isn't much different. Now, it doesn't look good to have a whole pot of money at a time when people are feeling real pain at the grocery store in particular, and not trying to find a way to hustle that money out. This same type of thing went on in several other cities with housing assistance during the pandemic. And so you would think that a local system a mayor would say, let's find a fast way to get this money out. She admitted she's got some budgetary and staffing constraints to deal with. So I don't know that it would be that hard to sit with the council and say, let's come up with a way to deal with this.
Well, Ebony, Sonya says it shouldn't be hard to sit with the council, but it's like anything when you've got somebody who's
council?
I was gonna say who's saying that we will sue you, if you don't release this money. Even that, going that far, Phil Mendelson, the council chair, says,
Absolutely.
come Tuesday, we may have to pass legislation to say we can sue the mayor to get this money.
I actually wanted to go back because you started by saying, let's look at the picture of it. And when we look at the picture and put numbers on those who are the food deserts in this area, we're talking about 75% of DC's food insecurity exists in east of the river, east of the Anacostia River, Wards 7 and 8. And a lot of times when we talk about these issues, we are always talking about Black communities that are living in these underserved areas that always are affected the worst. And so sometimes you have people and others, this is just money. Why are they doing? They giving handouts, whatever. And so, but we're talking about a large number of residents who are affected in this. And when you talk about the food insecurity issue in the area, when you're looking at numbers, you're talking about over 17,000 that are children that are affected by this. 1 in 7 children, according to Feed America, face hunger, right? And so sometimes when we throw out numbers, for those who are natives that are looking at this, right? Who you may not be there anymore. You may even be in gorgeous Prince George's, right? But you remember, when this is at a time when ERAP just opened for housing assistance and had glitches at the same time.
That's right, yeah.
So now I'm in DC. I'm looking at I may not have the benefits. I'm trying to find out if I'm going to be able to get housing assistance at the same time. Even though COVID is over, the effects of COVID are still lingering.
Yes.
Are still lingering. And so on one end, the mayor also has the issue because I was speaking with some who work, with just in the administration. They were saying, look, part of the issue is that because of COVID or coming out of COVID, you have people that aren't working in buildings, they're working from home. And so when you talk about a lot of the revenue that comes into DC, it's coming from like commercial businesses. Downtown area, we're seeing they're not seeing the numbers, they're not seeing the traffic, so that's money that's not coming into the city. And so how do we make that up? I think when you look at all that, what might have been a better game plan is if the mayor would have said where is that money? Like, be specific with that.
Yeah, because I think once you, to Sonia's point, once you get to an issue, there's some basics in life. You got to eat.
Got to.
And so if you're talking about those who need it the most and you're not really giving a clear idea, you want to hold the money up.
But you see cranes in the sky all the
time.
You're like, okay, so what are you about to do with it?
And today, in questions that need answering, let's say that this gets done the way that the council wants to do, expediting it. Are we sure that same expedition will actually get that money into the hands of the people who need it, that assistance in the hands of the people who need it as quickly as they need it? Or will it still get hung up in politics? The energy that they have put into saying, well, doggone, we're going to pass a resolution, we're going to probably have to sue the mayor. All of those are legal processes that just bogs everything down.
Yeah.
So why would you opt for something that may just drag it out even further when you could just say, can we expedite this?
So this is sort of back on the council. Just staying with this, I had a chance to speak with LaMonica Jones. She's the director of DC Hunger Solutions. That organization works with food insecurity issues among low-income families in the district. Jones says her organization is at a loss for the Bowser administration's position on the SNAP funding.
It's particularly confusing for us because we worked hard to have legislation passed for Give SNAP a Raise, and then we worked to advocate for the excess revenue amendment, which was introduced by Councilmember Louis George, that was funded and then signed by the mayor as well. So we're particularly confused as to why at the 11th hour the decision was made not to disperse funding for Give SNAP a Raise. So we are confused along with everyone else is.
So putting a bow on, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm totally agreeing. Like, she's showing confusion. We have Mendelson expressing himself. We also have Councilwoman Christina Henderson that has come out to say, she helped introduce the Give SNAP a Raise legislation and talked about how we have this $89.2 million. The budget FY23 upwards of $82 million. And so people are like, okay, so what are we? You got to give me more than that. You got to give me more than that.
And even if some could argue whether or not the $39 million really it is enough, but when you hear millions, that's a lot of money. I want to pivot over to a national story, and we'll come back a little bit local. The president first of all, let me give the number, 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Phone lines are open. As I said, it's a reporters roundtable, and you have reporters here talking about the news of the week, but we always like to hear your questions or your comments and your thoughts of what's going on in and around you. Claudine Gay resigned as president of Harvard this week. Gay and several other presidents of universities, University of Pennsylvania, and I'm sure I'm missing the third.
MIT and then
couple, right? Testified before Congress last month about the issue of anti-Semitic rhetoric on those campuses. She, in her testimony, she was pressed about whether or not students on that campus would be admonished, whether or not there would be repercussions for anti-Semitic rhetoric. And she didn't dance around the question, but she didn't quite say this is what would happen.
We can criticize all of the answers.
She said it was bad. Right.
She didn't unequivocally.
She didn't.
That was it. Say that word again, Sonya.
Unequivocally.
Because that's a hard one. Don't ask me to say that. I want you to say it again. And so then they went into looking into her research work and found some inaccuracies in terms of her citations, right? And she did apologize for not going far enough in her testimony. And say your word again.
Unequivocally.
Denouncing anti-Semitism.
Correct.
But it did not save her. What are your thoughts, Sonya, on her resigning, first black president in Harvard's history?
Well,
right?
It was never about what she did or didn't say about Israel and anti-Semitism, nor is it about what she did or didn't cite academically. It is all about DEI. It is all about going after diversity, equity, inclusion, affirmative action.
And that is what DEI is for folks who didn't know.
Whatever you want to call it, the advancement of people of color and women, and dismantling those systems that have protected these classes over the years. And had it not been for her surviving this onslaught around on what she didn't say about anti-Semitism on Harvard's campus, had she survived even this situation with her citations and alleged plagiarism, they'd find something else.
Because even the university said the plagiarism, it really were minor inaccuracies.
They were behind her.
Yes.
She had whole let. I mean, she.
So then, why did she step down, Ebony? If the school was behind her, why not just push through it?
Let me tell you something. In everything, you got to follow the money trail. And so, and I'm gonna speak a little less because Sonya was going in when we were in the other room with dates and receipts. So I was just listening. I was like, "Yes, sis, go."
Okay.
But
Are you saving it? Are you holding back, Sonya? We're at the round table
but
now.
It was really good though.
Okay.
But when we were going back and forth, one thing I noticed, just going back and looking. First of all, people mad at this black woman, educated in private schools, degrees from Stanford, Harvard, teaching at these places. And so you're going to hear these affirmative action, all day long. But when I began to dig at one of the major players that was also pushing for the school to fire her, it was Bill Ackman, who is a billionaire. And he published 3 letters talking about why she shouldn't be there and against what she said against Jews. But in that letter, when I began to really, really dig and look at the letter, in it, he then goes for an attack on DEI, like hardcore, which I was like, now we get into what's really bothering you. And so in it, he said, and I wrote a few, he said that he's heard from members of the Harvard community that Harvard's Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and Belonging is an important contributing factor to the problem that is happening they ain't got nothing to do with what was being talked about. And he felt like that everybody was included in this DEI except for Jews. And then he felt like, he said he went on to talk to people on the campus about what they felt. He does this whole survey from people on the campus about DEI, and they feel like that it just means that black folk can get in and they can be victims. Like, it's a whole litany of just racist, to me, language talking about how you really feel about us. Because when you look at the numbers of tenured professors at the school, white men still make up like 56%.
Yep.
And I was telling Sonya, when we got one in the door, they running.
Well, everything old is new again. But before we get into that, let's talk about the timeline.
Get into it.
Let's talk about the timeline of this thing.
Yeah.
The U.S. Supreme Court struck down affirmative action in higher education on June 29th. Claudine Gay became president of Harvard on July 1st, or at least in early July. It was on her watch that Harvard said, in response to this U.S. Supreme Court ruling that we must now comply with, perhaps what we need to do is consider eliminating legacy admission. So, hey, if we can't make extra steps to bring in more students of color, more people who are in protected classes, maybe we just need to make everybody meet the same standard.
And Tim Kaine has introduced legislation, right? The senator from Virginia to do just that.
And then here we come in December, and because she didn't satisfactorily answer a question, They said, we must get her out of here. It is about, again, DEI. What, are you going to eliminate my ability for my child to go to Harvard? I went to Harvard, and my kids should go to Harvard, too. There are other universities, Carnegie Mellon among them, I think, that did respond by saying we're getting rid of legacy admission. So they didn't want that happening. There is an old axiom that goes, they want a black woman to do the job until the black woman does the job.
Come on.
So that's what we might be looking at here. Are you doing that job too well to satisfy somebody? And then in terms of this type of attack, I was reading a report that said this is a new tool in the conservative toolbox for going after people of color.
Because we must say and put in context that testimony was before a Republican-controlled committee, and Elise Stefanik was the one who was really grilling.
Elise Stefanik, Harvard alum,
right.
yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes,
Harvard alum.
Harvard alum.
So she had some interest.
Skin in the game.
Yeah, there you go. That's
what we'll call it.
Right.
We'll call it that.
Okay.
But this is no new tool.
No.
Everything old is new again, like we said before. If you've been around Washington, D.C. and inside the Beltway politics long enough, how could you not look at this and think of Lonnie Guinier, the late Lonnie Guinier?
Bill Clinton's former nominee for Attorney General.
One of the most brilliant attorneys in this country, who was nitpicked out of her nomination for Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. How could you look at this situation and I think of Joycelyn Elders, Dr. Joycelyn Elders, educated pediatric endocrinologist, who was the first black Surgeon General, who was taken down for her controversial statements that today don't sound that controversial at all, in terms of children need to be educated about sex and masturbation, among other things. How could you look at this situation and not think of Hazel O'Leary and the attacks on her spending just too much money as a Clinton cabinet secretary? You can even come forward in history and look at the Obama administration. How could you not think of Shirley Sherrod and the way that they went after her for allegedly saying something racist at an NAACP speech that turned out not to be racist at all, and the victory that she got out of it eventually. So there may be good things to come of this for Claudine Gay. I mean, Joycelyn Elders survived the onslaught on her reputation. And now this country celebrates National Masturbation Month, which began in 1995.
Full circle.
Okay.
Full circle.
All right. So look,
in honor of her.
Okay, hold your thought, Ebony. I got to pivot here for a moment. Not totally pivot, but Ebony, you had mentioned Ackman, and I do want to sort of get into what Al Sharpton has said in response to that. He says the National Action Network will show Ackman that his attacks on DEI, President Gay, and Black Americans have consequences. This Thursday, our team will picket outside of his office so New Yorkers, his investors, and corporate America can see Bill Ackman for who he is. If he doesn't think Black Americans belong in the C-suite, the Ivy League, or any other halls, we'll make ourselves at home outside of his office. And he did also speak about the attack on Gay as a attack on every black woman in this country who's put a crack in the glass ceiling. So hold your thought. I'm going to let you pick up on that because the music's playing. That means we got to take a break. We've got a good conversation going right now. Phone lines are still open, 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Don't forget, you can hear every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com, or you can download the 96.3 HD2 app on your smartphone and hear the program live in its entirety. If you're on the phone line, stay right there. Ken, we will get to you. The Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM Channel 141, 96.3, and WHUT TV. I'm Bramante Bryant. The Original Quiet Storm with John Mons is next on WHUR. We'll be back in just a few seconds.
On the go and on demand, WHUR and WHUT are with you. Download the WHUR app today to get full access to shows, playlists, and our latest contest. To access WHUT on demand, download the PBS app and make Howard University Television your station. Catch up on our WHUT original productions anytime, anyplace on YouTube at WHUT TV. WHUR and WHUT, better together.
DC, Maryland, and Virginia, you might have noticed something a little different on Monday nights at 8 p.m. I'm Angie Ange, our Director of Content here at WHUT. And Monday nights at 8 p.m., we like to call it Must See DMV. All your favorite shows from all your favorite creators focus solely on what makes DC, Maryland, and Virginia so special. So set your clock, and we'll catch you at 8 p.m. right here on WHUT, Howard University Television, telling your stories on your station.
Welcome back to the Daily Drum. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. We're at the Reporters Roundtable discussing some of the top stories of the week. You're watching WHUT TV. Our guest tonight is founder and editor-in-chief of Black Women Unmuted, Sonya Ross, and Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent with American Urban Radio Network. Before we went to break, we were talking about the president at Harvard. I knew I was going to make that mistake.
Call her home, though. Call her home.
I was about to say, some would say Howard. It was the Harvard, but anyway, Harvard University resigning, and Sonya just went down a litany of, in context of gay
call.
as part of an overall, she sees it, attack, for lack of a better word, on DEI and black excellence, some may say. Ebony, what did you want to say? I mean, you wanted to follow up on that.
Let me just say this. That roll call is for us to remind us how powerful we are, to remind us how we disrupt rooms when we show up, that our just mere presence creates a disturbance, which is why it is important for us to rally around each other.
And I was going to ask you, do you think this story will have legs? You know what I mean by that? In the black community, how it was covered, whether nationally, I don't know how far it'll go nationally.
I do believe it will have legs. The question is, what will those legs be, right? So for me, when I was talking with a few professors, I was saying, so what do you think that means when where will she go from here? Is this some type of also clarion call message to many of our brilliant brains to also have even more seats at our HBCUs where they don't want us? I believe in what Shirley Chisholm said. I'm bringing my own chair, but sometimes I'm sitting at the table with my own family sometimes too, right? And so will that be one of them? I'm ride or die with her either way, right? But I'm curious to see what discussion happens in our own spaces, in our own communities with that, as we continue to push and knock down doors. And so that's why I said when Sonya was doing that roll call, that's for us to remember how powerful we are, but also that we need safe spaces, because that is a lonely position, a stressful position.
Well, listen, he came for black women, and sisters around this country are taking those earrings off and Vaseline.
It's about to be an Alabama brawl.
Yeah, it's about to be Alabama brawl for real.
Yeah.
Sisters are hot about this, and it's not new to us. It surprised me, frankly, that she survived that first whack across her knees.
Honestly, I was surprised too. I was like, okay.
But for them to redouble and come back with an additional attack did not surprise me at all. But be careful what fight you ask for. You think about the way Andrew Breitbart came for Shirley Sherrod and accused her of giving a racist speech. And long story short, she got fired by the Agriculture Secretary for President Obama.
Bill Slack.
And Shirley Sherrod is an esteemed, very, very respected civil rights activist, has given her whole life to fighting for the equality of black farmers and people in rural spaces. Well, in the end, Shirley Sherrod sued Breitbart, won, took his money. The late Andrew Breitbart, I should say, took his money, and right now is right back doing work for the Agriculture Department. The Obama administration decided to offer her job back again, but she said no.
Were you surprised at that? No,
because she had work to do. She said, rather than take that job back, let me go over here and drag Andrew Breitbart to the ground.
Right.
And this is the way Black women respond to this type of disrespect, perceived or real. You see.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Phone lines are open. Let's go to the phone lines, and Ken is calling from the district. Ken, go right ahead with your question or comment.
Hey, Happy New Year. I appreciate you taking my call.
Same to you, Ken.
Thank you. So, this isn't just an attack on Black women. This is an attack on Black people. I work for a federal agency, and at the beginning of training, they required us to go to the Holocaust Museum, and I refused to go. And I was asked why. And I said, because I have a difficult issue relating to something that was a European tragedy. And therefore I can't ignore our own people's tragedy who continually suffer. And I actually got a lot of strife for it, and it's fine. It's not a big deal, at least in regards to me holding up for something. But, I think one of the problems that bothers me most, especially on the Hill, is that we have Black legislators that are not loud enough, are not vocal enough. Even the attack that's against Black women or women of color in Congress, it doesn't just happen from the Republicans. It happens from the Democrats as well. Even as they start to, Pelosi had one after Congresswoman Omar, Congresswoman Tlaib, and even Ocasio-Cortez wanted them to stay in their place. And even the fact that she's considering running for Speaker again, even though Hakeem Jeffries should be the Speaker coming. So the assault against Black people is a never-endless struggle. But
well, let me let the guest, if I can, Ken, because I think you make some good points. He says there's not enough leadership. Ebony, you're. I'll let you get yourself together there. Ebony's a White House correspondent. Sonya, he's saying that there's not enough Black leadership on the Hill that are responding to these. Do you see it that way?
Well, the real issue, I would like to say, first of all, that Black women are Black people, too. That's not to say that Black men are not being done wrong. They are. But we are Black people, too. But anyway, it's not a question about what Black lawmakers on the Hill will or will not do. You got to understand the constraints and the limits on what they can effectively do. So getting elected to Congress and representing a district is only half the struggle. You have to have positioning and leadership, and you have to pick your battles, and you have to think war, not battle. You have to say, am I going to win the war? And is engaging in this short-term battle going to win the war? And that probably is where most of their heads are. Now, there is long seniority among lawmakers, but there also are lawmakers who are doing their absolute very best. I think about Representative Jasmine Crockett and how she goes down swinging all the time in judiciary hearings and putting truth to the lies. She's the one from Texas? Yes. Yeah, young lady.
She comes from Marjorie Taylor Greene, like, oh my goodness.
Like nobody's business.
Yeah. And she comes ready.
So there are lawmakers who are doing good work. Black lawmakers who are doing good work. And we just have to be able to give the benefit of the doubt. Yes, we ideally would love to see more. But if they're in a posture where they got to think war, not battle, we have to recognize we're not going to see them on every battle.
What's your sense of that, Ebony? You cover the White House. You're on Capitol Hill. Do you see that, what Ken is talking about, or do you see it differently?
I see the strategy in the game that many of our lawmakers still feel like they have to play. Even the conversations that I have off the record, and I'm like, okay, what is going on? Why didn't this or why didn't this? So to that, I say this, and this has always been, this just isn't now. The onus is on us to realize the power that we have as voters to put pressure. Right? And sometimes you will even have I need you to put pressure on this issue and help me blow this up. And so I feel the pain of the caller of what you're saying. And yes, there are, I'm not going to lie, there are some Black leadership that I look all the way side-eyed at. I really do. And that's not on the federal, but on a local level as well. And so, we always say, kinfolk ain't skinfolk, skinfolk ain't kinfolk. But what that just means is if you have somebody that you have put in office, and they are not representing what they said that they would represent in your best issues, then there are two challenges. Either one, you begin to put yourself in a situation to become a leader in your community, or you mobilize to help bring someone else in that. I'm not into just having people fill a seat because of what they look like, because guess what we got on the Supreme Court?
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're at the Reporters Roundtable. Ebony, I wanted to ask you because I think Sonya mentioned this a ways back when we were talking about black women and their power at the polls. And many would say Joe Biden got into the White House because of black women at the polls, right? There's some discussion whether or not black women or black people in general will come out for Joe Biden in 2024. But before we get to him, I want to start with the man who preceded him and former President Donald Trump. This week, Maine has come out to say we have taken him off of the presidential primary ballot. And now he's appealing that, basically saying the Secretary of State is partisan and the decisions that they're making. We know what's happened in Colorado. First of all, how big of an issue is this? Because we assume it's going to make it to the Supreme Court, and they're going to have to look at this to either stop all of these states from doing this or allow the states to do it. So how big of a story is this? It's it trickles out every week, another state doing something or another state not doing it.
I think it's a big issue. Every tentacle that we're dealing with this issue, because we've not really seen this before. So you've got courts that are having to make decisions that they've never had to make before. You're having people bring up, like post-Civil War era, lean on amendments that we hadn't really seen. So people are going back to the drawing board trying to figure out and make decisions and set precedents, because what we don't want to see is a repeat of this at all. It is huge. We have a twice impeached president, 91 felony counts, 4 criminal cases. We're sitting back with popcorn trying to figure out what in the world is going on. And now I think people are really realizing how important your secretaries of state are. We haven't had this conversation on Secretary of State, your election officials and workers. I've not really seen conversations in too many times past where we have dug this deep. And now the courts have been on display during the Trump administration and Biden administration like we have never seen before. I really feel like, I know every year we say every election is very important, but I really believe that in America we are at such a pivotal and crucial time to decide who we are. I've never heard people talk about the word democracy is at stake so much. So when we talk about whether or not his name is going to be able to be on the ballot, and that is going to be, and the Supreme Court is going to have to decide, like, what is an insurrection? We know we saw what we saw, right? But this is just a new experience for not just those who are, for just Americans, but also our local leaders. And we are waiting to see how the pendulum of justice, how it will swing. When you said Secretary of State's, first thing I kind of thought back, Sonya, was I remember when I really became aware of the Secretary of State in the election of 2000 and Katherine Harris in Florida, right? And that's when that Secretary of State, I think she had to certify the election.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, and so she became a big story. Do you think Trump is running scared? I mean, some may say he's been running scared since he announced, because he's trying to run away from a prison term, and that's why he's running. Is he running scared, or is he counting on the Supreme Court to clear him in terms of these ballot issues? He said before, right, I put 3 of these justices on the court, and he's basically said, I'm expecting them to do right by me.
Both, first of all. But understand this. Of course this is going to the Supreme Court for review. Of course the judicial branch of the government is doing what it is supposed to do. Of course the executive branch in state levels are doing what they're supposed to do. The judicial branch at the state level is doing what it's supposed to do. That's what happened in Colorado. That's what happened in Maine. This is active checks and balances. Now, if you were paying attention in social studies,
they weren't, Sonya. They weren't.
Still laughing in the back of the room.
That was my favorite subject.
Remedial
I was paying
civics.
attention.
You would understand that this is the way things are supposed to work. Yes, the legislative branch is supposed to step in at some point and do what it's supposed to do. And yes, President Biden will weigh in as the head of the executive branch on the things that he is supposed to do. All of this is the way it is supposed to work. So what was happening is an attempt to selectively have these organs of government do their job when it benefits Mr. Trump. That is what he'd like to happen. He'd like for the Supreme Court to rule in his favor. He would like for the legislative branch in the judicial branch in Colorado to do what he wants them to do. He would love for the executive branch in Maine to do what he wants them to do. He would love for those 3 justices he appointed that went up to the Supreme Court on his watch to do what he needs done. But if doing the job takes them into a place where it doesn't benefit him, that's where they would like to pull apart the pillars of this democracy and adjust and change it. That's why they're so hell-bent on going after things that apply according to the 14th Amendment. And isn't it ironic that this whole discussion around whether he is or isn't fit to be on the ballot is built around a precedent that was set because of a Confederate possibly coming in to be president of the United States after the Civil War. So the 14th Amendment is working the way it's supposed to work. All of the applications of the 14th Amendment are working the way they're supposed to work. So the hope is a precedent that can help eliminate the fear that Mr. Trump is dealing with right now.
America has never escaped or gotten away from the Civil War. I really feel like, and so it may look different. It may be a boardroom. It may be like Harvard Professor Gay. But we are still dealing with issues of freedom, of equality, of white supremacy, and how it is showing up, whether it is the issue of student loans or an insurrectionist.
Preach.
And so when going back to January 6th, that was the overturning. Let's look at what happened in Georgia. White folks still mad about black folk coming into power, right? What happened after Reconstruction? White folks mad about blacks coming into power. What's happening on our campus? White folks mad about black folk coming. The caller just said, working for a federal agency, he was told he had to go view the Holocaust Museum.
Well, when you don't learn the lessons of history, you're doomed to repeat them. This is what has been going on cyclically in the United States since Reconstruction. So what ended up happening, and we want to learn the lessons of the history, what ended up happening? Well, the possible, I think it was Jefferson Davis, they were trying to make sure he could not become president of the United States, so he didn't. And instead, the president who succeeded Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, picked apart the Freedmen's Bureau, destroyed Reconstruction, and installed Jim Crow, which ruled this country for another century. It is a lesson of history that we failed to learn, and we're doomed to repeat. So that's where we are now.
And now they're just trying to erase it. So now we just gonna do it. Just erase it.
They don't want us to learn it.
You're just making up stuff now. Like, you're not even like embellishing. You're just making up a script.
That's right.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're going down that history rabbit hole. And Andrew Johnson, the first president to be impeached. Folks, remember that. Republicans now want to impeach President Biden. They want to impeach the Homeland Security Secretary. When we talk about Biden, Ebony, and his issues right now, his poll numbers very low. There is fear that black folks are not going to come out for him in 2024. What's the pulse that you're getting? What's the sense that you're getting on Capitol Hill about that issue?
So I think we have to be very careful. There's legitimacy to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think we have to be very careful when it comes to polls, because sometimes polls push a narrative. People create polls and it pushes a narrative that may not always be there, right? And so I'm always digging at them because I'm like, where are you getting the sample from? I may know one person who's ever gotten polled. I'm just being serious, right? However, Biden does have, what polls do show is they point to what you need to be doing and who feels ignored. I think it is very too early on to be saying, declaring Trump a winner and saying all black men are voting for Donald Trump. I don't see any evidence of that. I do see that there is a growing frustration among black communities, absolutely. But I think when we do that, I hear people often say, well, what has he done? What happened in there? What happened? What has been happening with this administration? And then you throw Vice President Kamala Harris under the bus and don't realize that this woman has been on the trail and has been doing the work as well. We've got the American Rescue Plan, infrastructure, chips and sciences, $7.3 billion for HBCUs, more than any other president. And I'll agree with the press secretary. What we've seen under the watch of this president has been more than what we've seen of most presidents. And this is just, his first time around. And so I'm just like, from cutting child poverty. Now, there are things you can get him on, because many people feel like some of the promises that he made on criminal justice, policing reform, they're not seeing. But I have to add into that mix, some of these issues you got to lay at the feet of Congress, too.
Well, understand one thing. Number one, black voters are not stupid.
No.
And black people are a lot more savvy about how we leverage our vote, from having been used as an influence vote for a century, and or at least since the 60s, when the large numbers of us could finally vote thanks to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. We are not that dumb. And then we also are over-targeted for disinformation.
Yes.
There are rooms full of people all over this world sitting in rooms creating false narratives and false information to dangle in front of black audiences in order to influence these people enough to give up and stay home.
How do you combat that, Sonya?
Well, we're hip to it already. Black people are not that crazy. If you go on any of these college campuses, go this college campus we're sitting in right now, and ask a voting age young black voter, they might say something like this: I'm not happy with what I'm seeing from President Biden, but I'm not dumb enough to pick something worse than President Biden. I'll give my vote this time, but I want better, but I understand where worse lies.
Is part of the message with the Biden administration messaging?
Absolutely. I do believe
Yes.
that. I'm going to
How
just say
come
this.
they can't figure that out? Sonya,
don't
you both
take-
have been on the Hill. These people are experienced. They know what they're doing, right?
I love Michelle Obama will always be my first lady, but y'all stop taking that advice. When they go low, we go high. Look, sometimes I need them to hit it. I need you to go. I need you. Sometimes you got to go where they are just to let them know. And so I think sometimes, and I've been in the room a lot, right? Covering the White House. I can almost tell you what the president's going to say when he starts speaking. I really want President Biden to step away from that resume speech that he gives, because he's also dealing with people looking at his age, that he's getting older. So when you do that, it just you kind of lose people. I need him to speak, to let the people know that he is empowering them through the moves that he has made, and because of their decisions to put him in office, this is what he has delivered, although there is more that we have to do. I need them to make the connection as to why things that aren't happening in your community, lay it at somebody else's foot. I need him to come with a lot more power. When he is talking, I was speaking with Cliff Albright of Black Voters Matter, and the one thing, and it's amazing that you said that, I said, what are some of the top 3 things that you want us to be, voters to be aware of that they're not? He said the first thing was, he said that the disinformation targeting Black America was the number one thing. And he said, expect to see a lot of that in 2024. And also conservatives, he said, using us to target and play on us when it comes to the economy. We've got to be educated about the issues, and not only us, but also we have to have these conversations with our youth. You've got 40 million Gen Zers that are going to be available to vote. Now, registered is a whole different story, but who are available to vote. One thing that I do know that I've heard in many rooms is that the administration is trying to figure out how in the world to target younger voters, because they're not traditional in how they think. And one issue that some are turned off is the handling of the war in Gaza. That is one issue that
every cycle, something like Gaza comes up and is used as the reason that young voters are disenchanted and that young voters are disengaged. But young voters, again, are not stupid. And the Democrats in particular rely upon a fear factor to drive our voters to the polls.
Absolutely.
Meaning Black voters to the polls specifically. They rely on that fear factor. They rely on us feeling like absolutely everything is at stake. So being laid back right now only gives bandwidth to be panicked later, for us to be panicked later. And it's a strategy that has unfolded for, generations.
You think we overplay the panic mode?
Well, I don't think the Black public overplays the panic mode.
Politicians.
I think that there is an over-reliance on that. I recall being an 18-year-old voter and hearing, if you don't vote, they're going to turn back the clock on civil rights and everything that you fought for will disappear. And that was the panic button that got pushed a lot.
The Vote or Die campaign.
Yes. So it's gone around for years.
Before we run out of time, I want to sort of come back local a bit here in the DMV. We're just 3 days into the new year, and the violence in the DMV, not just in the district, but in the surrounding area. Young lady killed in a hotel in the district. Several people killed out in Prince George's County. Ebony, what's your sense? I'm assuming both live in the DMV, Sonya? Ebony?
No, I got my papers and left, but I'm trying to come back in.
on.
I need these prices to go down.
I know.
The rent's too damn high.
And this uptick in violence. Is there what can be done? I think from a policy standpoint, public safety standpoint, do you see something that's not being done that can be done? Everyone is kind of searching for answers. And we keep talking about this, tougher on these youths who are doing the carjacking. Well, what's your sense of that? Again, because we're just into the new year and we're already kind of talking about violent and, fatal incidents in the DMV.
That is such a, honestly, when you said we were going to talk about that is such a loaded and to me complicated issue in D.C. But one thing we do know that it has to be a full-on, hands-on approach, not just from the mayor's office, but police to the community, to organizations. There's got to be a great investment into our communities. And the reason why I say that is because I will never forget going to a meeting, and there were a bunch of youth there, and one of the young men stood up and said, "I've been to more funerals than my age." They broke us off into groups, and then the youth had to speak, and they said, "Name one thing that you feel." And the groups were in different areas of the room, but one thing that many of them said was hopelessness. which broke my heart because I'm like, they're not even sitting near each other, but that is ringing true within them. So the question is, what does that look like? How does that manifest from our homes to our school systems, to violence prevention, and to resources? That same meeting, one of the issues was, there's a rec center here and a rec center there, but I'm not about to go into that neighborhood. I can't get there because, first of all, I'm trying to come home at night. I'm not trying to get killed. The second part of that was, yes, I do go to some of those centers, but the computers that y'all said are supposed to be in there, they're not in there. The programs that you said are supposed to be in existence, they're not really set up correctly. And so you have that mindset that is also out there. And I think you've even, it's daunting. Now, I am a native Washingtonian. I grew up in Edgewood at a time when they called the area Little Beirut, right? So I remember being raised in that type of environment, but my training really came from my home. But you got a lot of parents out here that's struggling, that's working more than one job, that's got several kids, that's trying to figure things out. I do know that one thing that the mayor's office that we'll see roll out in February that some people have pushed back on is this real-time crime center that's going to be opening up in February, where there's going to be a lot more surveillance in the area. Some people feel like with all I'm not going to lie, these carjackings are dizzying, that there hasn't been enough enforcement and penalties for people youth that commit some of these crimes. But some are saying, is this surveillance center going to be like a big brother? Like, where's the oversight of this? Well,
there have to be consequences and repercussions.
Absolutely.
For what you do. And you out here being a
fool,
a plum fool, like the old people say. You acting a plum fool out here. There's got to be some consequences and repercussions for your actions. We have a generation of young people who have grown up on video games and a steady diet of taking care of themselves, and not a real good sense of reality. They feel there's always a reset button and that they can start over somehow. That said, what can we expect when we have given them nothing? The education they've gotten has been horrible. For most of them, left them with no options, left them with no skills, left them with nowhere to go to get a job, to get work. The work they can get doesn't pay enough to live on, and works them very hard. And they don't see a future that gives them the ability to be great. And so they come together as robbing crews and go out here and take what they want. Because they say society hasn't given me anything. Well, first of all, society doesn't really owe you anything. But one thing they do owe you is the ability to get a good education, a skill set to be able to take care of your family and take care of yourself. And they don't have that. So are we going to find a way to get that going for them or what? And right now, we're, 3 generations in on this same kind of hopelessness. So you've got parents who never had it either.
Absolutely.
And because of that, they don't know what to do with their young people. So consequences and repercussions. Then build some hope.
She is Sonya Ross, founder and editor-in-chief of Black Women Unmuted. She is Ebony McMorris, White House correspondent with American Urban Radio Network. Thank you both for being with us. Spirited, good conversation, history, current events. Stuff I like, so we were right in. Thank you both so much for being with us. A final thought, yes, Claudine Gay resigned this week as Harvard's president, but let's call it as it truly appears. She was forced out. Her stepping down puts a glaring spotlight on the crashing of partisan politics, education, and American policy. She apologized for not being more direct in denouncing anti-Semitic rhetoric on Harvard's campus during her congressional testimony last month, but that was not enough for some. What followed were accusations of plagiarism in her research work. As the first ever African-American to lead Harvard as its president, she was only in for 6 months. Now she's out, and that's a shame. That's the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, January 3rd. I'm Bramante Bryant in for Harold Fisher. Have a great night.
This program was produced by WHUT and made possible by contributions from viewers like you. For more information on this program or any other program, please visit our website at WHUT.org. Thank you.